Chapter 7 looks at middle childhood psychosocial development. Sometimes middle childhood is called school-age children as well. So when we're talking about psychosocial, we're talking about personality development and social relationship development, psychosocial. Alright, so the developing self-concept development. So the self-concept in middle childhood becomes more realistic and more complex. In early childhood, the self-concept is more single representation. It's more of I am good or I am bad, one or the other type thing, whereas in middle childhood, it's more representational systems. It's more complex. It's more realistic in that there's this balance between good and bad. They understand that maybe that they're good in math, but maybe struggle in English, okay? So it's taking into consideration various aspects of self. So the self-concept becomes more realistic and more complex, more representational systems. Self-esteem is very similar. So judgments about one's self-worth becomes more realistic and specific in middle childhood. So early childhood self-esteem tends to be more global, that I am good or I am bad. It's unrealistic, and it tends to reflect parent approval. Into middle childhood, they start having some self-worth that comes from their own personal accomplishments. They start taking pride in their personal accomplishments around 7 or 8, and it's less dependent on adult approval. Children in early childhood tend to accomplish something, run over to their parents and say, "Ooh, look what I just did," or "Did you see what I just did?" And they're constantly looking for adult approval. Now, after age 7, 8, getting into middle childhood, they are going to start to feel proud of what they accomplish on their own. They don't need somebody there saying, "Oh, good job," all right? So Erickson, psychosocial stages, they are into industry versus inferiority in middle childhood. The chief source of self-esteem in middle childhood is a view of their productive competence, that they can master skills, that they can complete tasks. So the virtue develops through resolution of the fourth psychosocial conflict, that industry versus inferiority. In middle childhood, or sometimes it's called school-age children, they're doing a lot of work at school. They're doing a lot of work in creating social relationships. Work, another a word that's associated with work, is industry. They're very industrious during this time, industry. But sometimes kids they're not going to be awesome at every single thing that they try, okay? They're going to fail sometimes, and they have to find this balance between really accomplishing things and then sometimes knowing that, all right, well, maybe that's not my strongest skill. So they have to find this balance, and when they find this balance, they have this sense of competence. So children must learn the productive skills their culture requires, or else face feelings of inferiority. And this includes social support from friends and family. So in middle childhood, their self-esteem becomes less dependent on adult approval, but they still need that social support from family and friends. Now, a child with low self-esteem is less likely to get along with peers. They're also more likely to develop a helpless pattern, okay? So what you can do to help a child feel like they are in control of their life, that they have help them acquire a higher self-esteem, I can do attitude, is by providing specific focused feedback rather than criticizing the child as like a whole person. So really pointing out specific things that they do that they can then change, rather than saying, "You are a bad kid for hitting George." Instead of saying that, instead of saying "you are a bad kid," point out that when you hit George, that was a bad decision. How can you treat George nicely next time? What's something that you can do differently so that you don't hurt George's feelings, so that you make a better decision? Do you see how that's a huge difference from saying you're a bad kid? It's very specific. It's saying when you hit George, that was a bad decision. Not that you're a bad person. You made a bad decision, or that was a bad behavior. So that's something that can change. So to discourage a helpless pattern, provide specific focused feedback. Now, kids with high self-esteem, when faced with a challenge, are going to persevere. They're going to develop strategies for success. Whereas kids with low self-esteem tend to give up and attribute failure to themselves. They're going to say, oh, I failed on this test because I'm stupid. Whereas a child with high self-esteem is going to say, oh, that was a hard test. I'm going to make sure to study even harder in the future. So self-esteem plays a role in competence in a sense of industry rather than inferiority. Okay, so it's all related. Self-esteem, competence, that's all related. Now, emotional growth and prosocial behavior in middle childhood. By age 7 or 8, children are aware of feelings of shame and guilt and pride, even when others are not around to see their action. In early childhood, really their actions are based on avoiding bad consequences, avoiding getting in trouble. In middle childhood, they're going to be taking on some of these emotions, being able to regulate their emotions on their own. So they're going to start feeling some shame and some guilt and some pride, even if someone's not around to say good job or bad job, all right? They also pick up on some display rules, so they're starting to learn what emotions are okay to show, which ones are not okay to show, so they're able to better regulate these negative emotions. Also in middle childhood, empathy and pro-social behavior increases. Children age 4 tend to have theory of mind. Now, it's going to continue to develop. We're going to be more empathetic and maybe engage in more pro-social behavior as we cognitively develop in middle childhood. So emotional growth is affected by parents' reactions to display of negative emotions. Emotional regulation involves effortful control. So they're learning to control their emotions more. They're learning that others feel different emotions than they do, and this helps them to feel more empathetic and to engage in pro-social behaviors that help other people. That's going to increase in middle childhood. Now on to the social part of psychosocial. So the child in the family. School-age children spend less time with parents and are less close to them than before. Why? Because they're in school now. They have friends. They are engaged in activities. So children exposed to parental discord had a high level of internalizing. They had high levels of anxiety. They maybe felt fearful, maybe had more depression, and engaged in more externalizing behaviors, engaged in more aggressive behaviors, fighting, disobedience, and hostility. So parental discord of the family atmosphere, if it's more negative, you're going to see that come out in many different ways, as well as it's going to come out in aggressive behavior, maybe disobedience, but children are also going to internalize some of these negative emotions as well. So co-regulation reflects a gradual shift in control from parents to children. So really, in early childhood, the parent is controlling the child. The parent is regulating the child through consequences, through timeout. In middle childhood, the child starts to regulate themselves a little bit more. So parents need to provide general supervision and encourage the child to self-regulate. So it's this transition. Early childhood, the parent's pretty much regulating them. In middle childhood, there's this co-regulation. And then in adolescence, you're going to see more of that regulation be handed over to the adolescent. All right. So Baumert sorted out or classified these different parenting styles. This video is going to explain it in detail about, parents. Some parents are very, very strict. That's the authoritarian parent. It's all about control and obedience. Authoritarian. Whenever I see authoritarian, I think of librarian. Authoritarian, librarian, very strict. No talking in the library. Very strict. It's all about obedience. They're not listening to the child so much about what their thoughts are. There's a lot of limits, boundaries, and less emotional support and much less emotional, just less touchy-feely kind of love, all right? The child tends to be unhappy, unpleasant, have lower self-esteem. Authoritative, the way I remember this, is VE, is the same 2 letters in love, all right? So this parent gives lots of love, and they tend to be more democratic. They tend to respect the child's individuality. They talk to the child about boundaries. So there are boundaries here, but there's lots of love. They're going to respect that child and communicate with that child to find out what they think about different things, rather than just saying, you need to obey me. Why? Because I'm the parent. Authoritative has much more love, and they're going to be they're going to treat their child a little bit more with see them as a separate person worthy of communication and working with them. All right. So the parents set firm limits and they enforce them, but they show plenty of love. They respect the child's individuality. Authoritative, with the VE, the love, right, have the most competent children. They tend to be self-reliant, popular, achievement-oriented, all right. Permissive. Permissive is really, this is the parent that just wants the child to like them, wants to be friends. So they're very permissive. They let the child pretty much do whatever they want. So a lack of boundaries, but there's lots of love there. The permissive parent just really loves the child, but doesn't want to make them upset. So these children tend to be very impulsive without self-control. These tend to be the Veruca-Salts, the really whiny, kind of annoying children that are used to getting everything that they want. All right. Now, neglectful or uninvolved is a lack of limits, so a lack of rules and boundaries, and a lack of love. This parent is uninvolved. The parent is focusing on their own needs rather than the needs of the child. These children are more likely to abuse drugs and get involved in crimes, do poorly in school, be more aggressive. All right, so parenting type is very much correlated with certain behaviors in the children. The most competent children come from parents that are authoritative, the VE at the end, the love one, the VE, that tends to be the most competent, all right? The children tend to be most competent. Why? Because authoritative parents do use a lot of inductive techniques in their discipline. So inductive refers to they try to induce desirable behavior by appealing to a child's sense of reason and fairness. So they're going to negotiate with them. They're going to talk to them. So they're, instead of saying, you're in trouble for hitting Jerry and you're grounded. That's very authoritarian. It's very, I don't need to even hear what your thoughts are or why you did it. Authoritative is going to say, all right, this is not okay that you hit Jerry. And then it's going to play into the child's sense of fairness and reasoning. So hitting Jerry, it hurts him and it makes him sad. What do you think you can do in the future so that you're not hurting Jerry's feelings? Why did you do that? Why did you act out like that? Why did you hurt him? And why did you make him sad? What's going on there? And what can be a consequence for that? All right, so inductive is really working with the child and helping the child to understand and internalize rules and really get the different rules by coming to those conclusions themselves, because you're tapping into the child's reasoning and fairness. So these intrinsic motivators for behavior. Now, power assertion is more what authoritarian parents do, the librarian, right? Authoritarian. It's all about putting demands and threats and spankings. This is less effective. Children who receive physical punishment after age 10 tend to have not very good relationships with their parents. So power assertion is not the best. Withdrawal of love is not good either. So that's ignoring, isolating, showing dislike for the child. We always need to give kids lots and lots of love. So the best way to discipline children is the way authoritative, the VE, parents discipline, through inductive techniques, okay? Talking with the child and getting them to adopt certain values and helping them to understand those values. Avoid power assertion and avoid withdrawal of love.